My pleasure. Thank you. And thank you for full confession here. I'm the one who prompted that song revision. And it's the first time I've gotten a full congregation to do that. And that was really fun. I enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed it too, somewhat, at least. Jesus had a challenge. He had to convince people that he was the Son of God. I mean, that can't be that easy. I try to convince people they just ought to take me seriously, at least some of the time. And I struggle with that bar. But Jesus was dealing with not just human inability to perceive reality. He was dealing with a whole universe that we're watching the playing out of what we talked about last night. Now, a few of you were not here last night. And we'll try to make sense out of it. But if you have the time, I could actually recommend that you go to the trouble of. Now you live stream, but do you have your things on file? Could they pull up last night still or not? Yes. Oh, that's the answer I was hoping to hear. Okay. So I could recommend that you might want to actually do that because it has some important content in it. But we're going to pick up, get all my parts and pieces working here. Got to plug that in or it won't work. There we go. That's better. Now, for the record here, the definitive response. This is what the title is, and we'll explain that. Some of you who were here last night, you already know, perhaps, if you can recall, where we left off. We had these accusations. Lucifer had lodged 9 categories of accusation against the God and the government of heaven. And it got to the point where Lucifer and all who sided with him were expelled. And then God went ahead with what Lucifer objected to in point number 3. Created the earth, Adam and Eve. And Lucifer was watching. And I would judge that just after creation week, he was euphoric because God had played into his trap in ways that Lucifer could never have imagined. It's like blessings from heaven. God has shot himself in the foot. We'll talk about that in a bit. And what's more, he'd gone and created Adam and Eve, and that provided another opening. I think Lucifer was in a very, very good mood at about that point. He was worried, admittedly, and there's a very graphic portrayal of this in Spirit Prophecy. He was struggling, he was worried, he knew he was going out on a limb, but at some point I think he was feeling pretty confident. But let's go on. So I left you last night with the question, if you were God, what would you do? If someone levels all these accusations against you, what are you going to do to prove them wrong? And I want you to look especially at number 9 and just recognize something very quickly off the top of the head here. Let's pretend that when I stand at this side of the pulpit, I am candidate A, running for mayor of Merlin. Do you have mayor around here? Probably do. Okay. So I want to be the mayor of Merlin. I'm wanting to get people to vote for me. And if I'm over here, I am candidate B also running for mayor of Merlin, okay? And so we have one of those little town hall type of things, okay, where all the candidates come together and, approximately 3% of the population come out to hear what the candidates actually have to say. So the candidate A, he gets up and he speaks and he says, well, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. It shows your fine civic attitude that you're here. But there's something very important I need to explain to you before we go very much further with this little debate or whatever we've got here. And that is, I need to tell you something about my opponent, candidate B. He is a notorious liar, and you cannot believe anything that he says. And then he goes ahead with his stump speech, whatever, I'm going to lower taxes, I'm going to, bring about world peace, whatever, okay. So he says what he says to try and get voted, But he starts off by saying candidate B is a notorious liar. You cannot believe a thing that he says. Well, his 5 minutes are up, and now candidate B gets to speak. What's the first thing he's going to want to say? I'm not a liar. And candidate A breaks the rule and says, he just lied. He just lied. Now, if you ever spend any time messing around in the field of formal logic, that is a fallacy known as poisoning the well. To poison the well means to say the other guy lies. You're tainting the water before anybody has a chance to drink it, to even know what he says. And so now anybody who gives any credence at all to this guy, he doesn't know whether he can trust this guy. And Lucifer claimed that God was lying. How is the universe going to know that God is not lying? Now, here's the challenging thing. When someone has said that you lie, how much value is attached to your words? Zero. Because nobody knows if they can believe you or not. They don't know that you're lying, but they might be. Once someone has said, you are a liar, there's absolutely nothing you can say that gets you out of that jam. So what's God going to do? What was that? Who said it? Prove it. Yes. At that point, this is the classic case where actions speak louder than words, because words don't mean a thing now. And that's the position God was in. So this is where we ended our meeting last night. What would you do? What would you do? Now, there's a few things that occur to me very quickly. Okay? If Lucifer was pressing charges like this against me, and I was God, I think one of the first things that would possibly cross my mind is vaporize him. just and turn everything back to the good old days, and all's good, right? But God does not do that. He just doesn't work that way. He does not work from force. He does not work from fear. And so God chose the road less traveled, and it's a longer one. He did a few things, but when it came to the big, formal, for the record statement, he waited 4,000 years. That's what God did. Okay, let's move on. Lucifer, we went through this last night. This is kind of review. Lucifer had lost faith in God because it didn't look like God was giving him what he wanted, or maybe he thought he needed it. God's not doing what God's supposed to be doing. I can't trust God. Okay, notice that. That's a huge thing. The loss of faith is the beginning of every evil thing in the universe. Whatsoever is not of faith is sin. It's impossible to please God without faith. Righteousness is by faith. Justification is by faith. Faith is a big deal theologically. Notice this statement. What is it to be in an unsaved condition? is it not to be living without that full confidence in God, which is born of love, which leads us to take him at his word? What is it to be unsaved? It's to not have faith. Right? I mean, that's what that sentence says. To be living without full confidence in God. If you can depend on God in anything and everything, if you have faith in God in anything and everything, you're in a saved condition. If you do not have full confidence in God, we've got a problem. What is it to be in an unsaved condition? Faith is a big deal, and Lucifer had lost it. On the other hand, faith is a very simple matter. I love this statement. Faith is a very simple matter. It's just confidence in God. Now, we can mess that up by saying, I have confidence in God that he will bless me as I buy this lottery ticket. Faith is confidence in God doing what God has said he would do, and not extending that to what I think he ought to do. Okay. Faith is confidence in God doing what God has said he would do. So it's important to know that. That's why we read the Bible. That's why, it's kind of logical, actually. Okay, let's go on. Lucifer was objecting to the law of heaven, and so we need to note a few quick things here about that. From the very beginning of the great controversy in heaven, it has been Satan's purpose to overthrow the law of God. Okay, so there's always been this focus on law. Okay, and yeah, just it is. Okay, let's go on. So here are a few different phrasings of what the law of heaven is. To give is to live. That's the law of heaven. To give is to live. The great law of life is a law of service. Service. That's the law of heaven. Self-sacrifice is the law of self-preservation. Well, Jesus said the same thing. He who lays down his life for my sake will find it. He who tries to save his life will lose it. Self-renunciation is the great law of self-preservation. And self-preservation is the law of self-destruction. Now, you could get confused on that, but you can also make sense out of it if you just think about it a little bit. You know what she's saying. If my primary concern is self-preservation, I won't preserve anything. I will destroy my life, and I will die eternally. That's not a good package. Okay? All of these statements describe the law of heaven. But with just this much, it seems like things might not work out so very well, right? It's half the package. Let's put it that way. Common sense will tell you that if all you do is continually give stuff away, you're going to run out of stuff. That seems pretty sensible. You know, I've got $1 million. Cool. Yeah, if you start giving away $1,000 a day, you can do a little math and figure out how long it'll last. But it will disappear. But that's only half the program. The flip side is God. Because the basic promise of God is that he will take care of those he has created. That's actually a big deal. Unselfishness, the principle of God's kingdom, is the principle that Satan hates. Its very existence he denies. From the beginning of the great controversy, he has endeavored to prove God's principles of action to be selfish. To disprove Satan's claim is the work of Christ. Now, I just want to think about this. This is really basic stuff. He says there is no such thing as unselfishness. It doesn't even exist. It doesn't exist in God even. And for him to require his creatures to be unselfish is just wrong. It doesn't exist. How can you require of us something that doesn't even exist? It's not possible. You yourself, God, are not purely unselfish. When push comes to shove, you'll take care of yourself first, and you know it. That's how you ended up at the top of the heap. That's why everybody worships you. That's why all the songs we sing are about you. You've exalted yourself, and I'm going to do that now myself. I will exalt myself. This is what we looked at last night. To disprove Satan's claim is the work of Christ. And then you notice those dots right after the word Christ on the screen there? Back to English teacher mode. What do we call those dots? Anybody know the name of that? It's an ellipsis. And if you have more than one of them, they're ellipses. That's the plural. But ellipsis. Yeah. An ellipse by itself would be a kind of like a round thing. But this is an ellipsis, and it means there's more going on here. I don't know why that came out in that font like that. That's kind of ugly, but anyhow. It's the work of Christ and of all who bear his name. To disprove Satan's claim is our job too. We're part of the team. We'll see more of that a little later on, but let's go on. So here's God. He's been accused. How shall the universe know that Lucifer is not a safe and just leader? To their eyes, he appears right. Stop for a moment. Can you believe what I just said? God just kicked Lucifer out of heaven, and the universe is looking on and saying, I don't see the problem. Why did he get kicked out? Lucifer appears right. Last night we looked at that statement that said that to the less exalted angels, they actually believed that Lucifer was the ruler of heaven. This guy's pretty good at pulling the wool over your eyes. God did not have an easy task responding to those accusations. This is an epic issue. We call it the Great Controversy. How shall the universe know that Lucifer is not a safe and just leader? To their eyes he appears right. They cannot see as God sees beneath the outward covering. They cannot know as God knows. Then to work to unmask him and make plain to the angelic host that his judgment is not God's judgment, that he has made a standard of his own and exposed himself to the righteous indignation of God, would create a state of things which must be avoided. But God can do anything. He has to avoid doing this one, though. God desired that a change take place and that the work of Satan be brought out in its genuine aspect. But the exalted angel standing next to Christ was opposed to the Son of God. The underworking was so subtle that it could not be made to appear before the heavenly host as the thing that it really was. But God can do anything. Sometimes no. Sometimes no. It could not be made to appear at that time the thing that it really was. God's going to take care of that problem, but it was going to take time. Satan could not be presented to the universe at once, there's the time factor, at once in his real character. His crooked course must be allowed to continue until he should reveal himself as an accuser, a deceiver, a liar, and a murderer. So this is interesting. In the court of the universe, deciding between the claims of God and the claims of Lucifer, Lucifer will lose his case entirely on self-presented evidence. we've got the Fifth Amendment, right? That's supposed to, protect the defendant from being like tortured into, his making a confession that wasn't true or something like that. That's really what it's intended for. A lot of people use it for a lot of other reasons now, and that's fun to watch too. But in Lucifer's case, the evidence against him is not what God says about him. It's what Lucifer shows himself. He's made the mistake of agreeing to testify. Satan had disguised himself in a cloak of falsehood, and for a time it was impossible. For a time, there's a time element, but during that time, it was impossible to tear off the covering so that the hideous deformity of his character could be seen. He must be left to reveal himself in his cruel, artful, wicked works. So we don't normally talk about things that are impossible for God to do, but this is one of them. At that time, it was impossible, even for God. He must be left to reveal himself. Interesting. Similar statement, God's purpose is to place things upon an eternal basis of security. Time must be given for Satan to develop the principles which were the foundation of his government. The heavenly universe must see worked out the principles which Satan declared were superior to God's principles. God's order must be contrasted with Satan's order. The corrupting principles of Satan's rule must be revealed. The principles of righteousness expressed in God's law must be demonstrated as unchangeable, perfect, and eternal. Now, I've mentioned, that there are sometimes things that God can't do. Well, this statement is a little bit different. This is a list of things that he has to do. We don't generally come up with lists of, to-do lists and say, here, God, you have to do all this. No, we usually leave that up to him. But circumstances made it so he must do these things. And I want you to see the things themselves. What was it that God had to do to respond to Lucifer's accusations? He must allow Satan to develop the principles. That's something that takes time, right? Anybody ever into photography where you develop your film, that's 5 minutes in this chemical and so many minutes in that chemical. Develop is something that occurs over a period of time, right? The universe must see. God's order must be contrasted. They're not going to see one side, they're going to see both sides here. That's how you set up a contrast. Satan's principles must be revealed. God's principles must be demonstrated. This is amazing. God is embarking on a pathway which expresses an incredible level of faith in the creatures he created. He says, yeah, it looks pretty bad right now, but when we get if you don't mind a little gambling reference here, when we lay all the cards on the table, I trust you guys to understand it. I think that's amazing. So an awful lot of governments that don't really trust their citizens all that much to figure things out. They have to, control the flow of information. They have to present things in the way they want to because, those poor knuckleheads out there in the hinterlands, they might believe misinformation if we're not careful. God, I suppose you could say he said the same thing. I don't want you to believe misinformation. So let's lay it all on the table. I'm not going to control the flow other than to a flow of information. I'm going to simply make it all available. I kind of like that approach. Everything that God is working to do there is gained as a matter of perception, right? The principles had to be developed so people could see them. They must see them. There must be a contrast. This is working with the intelligent minds of the universe. That's a big deal to me, anyhow. Okay, let's go on. The unfallen worlds saw that the character of God could be vindicated only through this trial and conflict of the two forces. The attributes of God must be made to appear. Of the stability of his government, there must be no question. It's a big deal. Being the ruler of the universe is just inherently a big deal. There must be no question. So how's he going to do that? How do you respond to all those accusations? God said, like any other election campaign, he said, for your government, you want the best qualified. Okay, fair. How do you decide who's the best qualified to put in your government? And the answer is simply the one who does the best job of taking care of the citizens. It's the best qualified, and that's what governments are for. And so God says, I want to show you what I'm willing to do to help you. I want to show you what I'm willing to do to take care of you. Even, in fact, if you do really stupid things. Even, in fact, if you rebel against my government, I want to show you what I'm willing to do to take care of you. But there was only one way to do that. Because Lucifer had said that God lied. And the universe, let alone human beings, didn't have enough confidence in God to know that when he said something, it was true. It might be true, but Lucifer said he lies. I don't know. Maybe he lies? Maybe? And God recognized that, and he played by those rules of the game. No verbal description could reveal God to the world. Words were never going to do the job. Through a life of purity, a life of perfect trust and submission to the will of God, a life of humiliation, such as even the highest seraph in heaven would have shrunk from, that's how God himself must be revealed to humanity. Words are nice, but they're insufficient. This is a big deal. Without the correct knowledge of God, the human family would be divested of all divine strength. Stop right there, don't read ahead. Be good. What does the word divested mean? Lose. It's taken from. It's the opposite of investing. It's divesting, right? XYZ Corporation is divesting itself of all investments in some country that we don't like anymore or something. You hear that. We're divesting. They're getting rid of the stuff, okay? Without the correct knowledge of God, the human family would be divested of all divine strength. Does that sound like a good place to be? Without the correct knowledge of God, that's where you end up. So it's important that God reveal himself to us, so we had the correct knowledge, right? With false attributes kept before the mind as belonging to God, the human family would be the dupes of satanic lies and the subjects of satanic agencies, and he could practice upon their credulity with success. One of the things I really enjoy about reading Ellen White's writings is that for a third grade dropout, she had a good vocabulary. There's some great vocabulary words in here. We already looked at divested. How many of you know what a dupe is? What's a dupe? That's not in our top 25 words these days. So let me explain that one. This is the etymology of the word, right? Not entomology, that's study of insects. This is etymology. That's the background of a word, okay? The word dupe comes from the word duplicitous. which comes from a thought back in Greek times of being two-faced. Do means two. Dupe actually is another form of it. If we had just, I mean, we used the Latin prefix bi, bi, right? That's how we came up with bicycles, two wheels. Okay. If we'd gone for a synonym, we could all be writing dupe cycles. You know? It's kind of the same idea. Dupe means two. Duplicitous means two-faced, which means that I'm talking to this group over here and I tell them one thing, but when I'm talking to this group over here, I tell them something else, which means that I am in fact lying, and a dupe is someone who believes my lie. Okay? Does that make sense? With false attributes kept before the mind as belonging to God, the human family would be the dupes of satanic lies and the subjects of satanic agencies, and he could practice upon their credulity. Oh, another great word. What does credulity mean? What would be a synonym for credulity? Today we would likely say gullibility. We're more familiar with that word now. Yeah. He could practice upon their gullibility with success. He could tell them garbage and they'd believe him without the correct knowledge of God. That's a big deal. And so Jesus came to try and solve that problem, right? How important was this to Christ? Well, the great object that brought Christ to the earth was to reveal the Father. Remember, this whole conflict is going on through perception. The universe and human beings have to know God's side and Lucifer's side. We chose the knowledge of good and evil. Adam and Eve, bless them, they signed us up for a course. And we got to go all the way to the end on this course now. We're going to understand the knowledge of good and evil. Jesus was here to explain the good, or to demonstrate the good. Because no verbal description could do it. The great object that brought Christ to the earth was to reveal, not explain, to reveal, not to describe, to reveal the Father. God is love. This was the great truth that Christ came to the world to reveal. The object of Christ's mission to the world was to reveal the Father. In all his ministry, all his self-denial and self-sacrifice, Christ's object was to reveal God to the world. Why, if he was revealing God, why do we talk about self-denial and self-sacrifice? Because God is love. And that's what love is a willingness to deny self, to sacrifice for someone else's good. That's what love is. And Lucifer said, nah. Unselfishness does not even exist. You can say you're doing good things for others, God. You can say that. But that's like a campaign promise. You know, there are rumors that politicians sometimes make promises that they don't actually intend to fulfill. I've heard that rumor. I don't know if it's true. In every case, I think it is. But Lucifer says, God, you can put on this whole unselfishness thing, but when push comes to shove, there's no such thing as unselfishness. And Jesus said, okay, let's see. Let's just see. Christ exalted the character of God, attributing to him the praise and giving to him the credit of the whole purpose of his own mission on earth. What percentage would that be? 100%. The whole purpose of his mission on earth. Now, right after the word earth, see that funny little line thing? What is that called? Does anybody know the name of that thing? Back in English teacher mode. Sorry about that. What's that thing called? What's that? I'm hearing half of the answer. I thought I heard the whole answer. It's a dash. What is it over here? I didn't spot the moving lips. I don't know who to look at. But somebody said a name, a kind of a dash, I think. No? Okay. I tried. It's an M dash. Why is it called an M dash? Because it's the same width as a capital M. Okay? There's one that's a little bit shorter. We use it for a totally different purpose. You know what that one's called? It's an N dash. Yes, because it's the same width as a capital N. Now okay, English teacher mode, sorry. An N dash is always used to replace the word to. So if I write, 5 dash to 10, it's 5 to 10. That would be an N dash. It's not a hyphen. Stern looks from the English teacher. Hyphens are used for something totally different. You hyphenate words with hyphens. That's what hyphens are for. N dash has replaced the word to, but this is an M dash. What do we use an M dash for? It's a sentence interrupter. And we've got 3 levels of sentence interrupters. The simplest one is a comma. The next one is an M dash, and the one after that is a parenthesis. It just depends on how much interruption you want to make. Okay? So if I had a simple sentence, I said, Tom, comma, John's brother, comma, went to town. Okay? So John's brother is the interruption. And I could go Tom, comma, John's brother, comma. I'm using commas to set off that interruption. I could go Tom, M dash, John's brother, M dash, went to town. Or I could say Tom, parentheses, John's brother, parentheses, went to town. And all it is, the difference is how much interruption do I want to create in the mind of the reader. That's exactly that's how those are used. But there's something else that's neat about this. They're usually used, not always, but they're usually used to set off what we call an appositive phrase. Okay, or apostrophe phrase, excuse me, not apostrophe phrase. So that example that I just gave you is actually pretty good. If I say Tom, comma, John's brother, comma, went to town, John's brother is defining Tom. Does that make sense? It's not changing the sentence. Tom went to town. That's your sentence. All I'm doing is, Tom, oh, by the way, Tom is actually John's brother. He went to town. Okay? I'm just adding some information. I'm adding a restatement of in this case, the subject of the sentence. Tom is the subject of the sentence, and I'm just telling you, oh, that's John's brother. Does that make sense? Now look at this example here. The whole purpose of his own mission on earth, interruption, to set men right through the revelation of God. What was the whole purpose of Christ on earth? To set men right through the revelation of God. Not just to reveal God, that's a great thing, but through that revelation to set men right. Not to set men right without the revelation, that wouldn't work. The whole purpose of his own mission on earth was to set men right through the revelation of God. This is a big deal. Statement goes on. When the object of his mission was attained, M dash, the revelation of God to the world. She does it again. This is the object of his mission, right here, the revelation of God to the world, M dash. The Son of God announced that his work was accomplished. When was that announcement? What did he say? It is finished. It is finished. He had to go to the cross to reveal the character of God, because Lucifer would have said, God, if push comes to shove, if things get hard enough, you will take care of yourself first before you take care of others. I know it. Unselfish does not exist. God could not stop anywhere short of dying to reveal the character of God. You just can't do that. And so, I mean, you could say Jesus stopped 15 seconds short or something. He said it is finished, and then he died, right? Because he had to make the announcement before the fact, because dead people don't talk, actually. So that's good. The Son of God announced that his work was accomplished, the character of the Father was made manifest to men. The character of the Father is he will die to help you. That's something to praise the Lord about. And you can see the whole crucifixion and the treatment of Christ in the Passion Week, the whole thing, being whipped 3 times or 2 times or whatever, the carrying the cross, the being slapped around, the beard pulled out, being spat upon. Everything there was Lucifer just simply saying, okay, we can up the ante here, God. How much of this are you willing to put up with? And Jesus said, Father, forgive them. They really don't understand what they're doing. I think that's kind of amazing. In the Garden of Gethsemane, the Father sent Gabriel to strengthen Jesus. And I really think, Father, forgive them, was Jesus trying to strengthen the Father. He says, I've been here. I know what it's like being a human being in a way that you can't. Even though God knows everything. I know, you can argue about that, whatever. But I've been here. They don't know what they're doing. God, forgive them. It's pretty remarkable. Christ came to this world for no other purpose than to display the glory. What's the glory of God? Character. For no other purpose than to display the glory of God, that man might be uplifted by its restoring power. There is restoring power in the vision of the character of God. There's not nearly so much restoring power in the explanation of the character of God. Had God the Father come to our world and dwelt among us, veiling his glory and humbling himself, that humanity might look upon him, the history we have of the life of Christ would not have been changed in unfolding its record of his own condescending grace. In other words, Jesus was a perfect representation of the Father. If just before the incarnation, God the Father and Jesus were having a chat one day and somebody said, tell you what, let's mix it up. You go, I'll stay. It wouldn't have made a bit of difference to us. We wouldn't have known. In every act of Jesus, in every lesson of his instruction, we are to see and hear and recognize God. In sight, in hearing, in effect, it is the voice and movements of the Father. Jesus said the same thing, right? Philip, I've been with you 3 years. How can you say, show us the Father? You haven't caught on yet, Philip? You're kind of slow. He who has seen me has seen the Father. So how can you say, show us the Father? Jesus could not express in words, to the understanding of man, the love of the Father. He could only say, or I might paraphrase that, the most he could say was, God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. The most beloved text in all of Scripture. The most famous text in all of Scripture. Is the best, is the farthest you can go with words. But Jesus could not even use those words to express to the understanding of man the love of the Father. But we're not done with the paragraph. But he did express the love of God in his actions. That's a big deal. It was the whole mission of Christ to reveal the Father. Consequently, the Savior of the world devoted more time and labor to healing the afflicted of their maladies than to preaching. Why would he do that? Anybody here from the business world? Do you know what ROI stands for? Return on investment. Yeah. If I can invest my money in the local bank and they will give me 0.039% interest every year, or I can invest in probably some Ponzi scheme over here, and he's promising me 35% annual interest, you know. That's a bad example because, yeah, don't take the 35% offer either. But yeah, you're going to put your time, your effort, your money where you're going to get the most return on investment. Jesus spent more time healing the afflicted of their maladies than to preaching. Now, he did preach. Sermon on the Mount, you know, we've got that there. They're parables. He did preach. Nothing wrong with preaching. But I like to put it like this. The proclamation is the explanation of the demonstration. And proclamation without demonstration is just imagination. It just doesn't work. Going on. little Greek. This is going to be my third Greek term. I'm up to half. I'm almost all done. I told him last night I'm not a Greek scholar. But we put it in English. Makes it easier. Jesus turned around. When he saw her, he said, "Be of good cheer, daughter. Your faith has made you well." And the woman was made well from that hour. And another example, Jesus said to him, "Go your way. Your faith has made you well." And immediately he received his sight and followed Jesus on the road. And one more example, Jesus said to the one thankful leper, "Arise, go your way. Your faith has made you well." What made them well? Their faith, yeah. Now, there's an interesting thing here. See those words? All of those words there are the same word in the Greek. The word is sozo, S-O-Z-O, sozo. I know I'm not pronouncing it like a Greek scholar would, but like I told you, I'm not a Greek scholar. But it's all the same word. Still a little more Greek. This is Gabriel speaking. "She will bring forth a son, and you," talking to Joseph, "you shall call his name Jesus, for he will save his people from their sins." Good. Those who sat at the table with him began to say to themselves, "Who is this? Who even forgives sins?" Then Jesus said to the woman, "Your faith has saved you. Go in peace." And one more. "For by grace you have been saved through faith, and that not of yourselves. It is the gift of God." So we've got Gabriel, then we've got Jesus, and then we've got Paul writing there, okay? But they're all talking about being saved. And what's interesting here is that those words are all a single Greek word as well. And that Greek word is sozo. Exactly the same Greek word for save as for made well. Because the word itself means to take something that's been damaged and bring it back to original condition. Like if you were scrounging around in a barn someplace and say you found this really old, dusty, dust-covered, let's go with a 1957 T-Bird. It's ugly. It's covered in dust. You know what it's worth if you fix it up? I don't. 57 T-Birds are pricey, though, I can tell you that much. If you restore the thing, if you sozo it, it's worth a lot. Healing, physical healing, was an illustration of spiritual healing because they work in the same way. They both actually change the thing. The guy couldn't walk. Now he can. The guy was a condemned sinner. Now he's not. We're talking healing here. Okay, just a few more slides. Made you well, saved, all the same Greek word, sozo. Jesus came to illustrate this for us. The Holy Spirit never has and never will in the future divorce the medical missionary work from the gospel ministry. They cannot be divorced. Bound up with Jesus Christ, the ministry of the word and the healing of the sick are one. God does not intend us to go about our ministry or our evangelism without incorporating a medical element. It doesn't have to be medical as in like, measles or appendectomy or something medical, but without incorporating a practical, helpful element. I like to tell people, this medical missionary work that we talk about, it's really very simple. If you happen to be a surgeon and the guy's got appendicitis and he's about ready to die, then surgery is a great way to do medical missionary work. But as much as I've wanted to, they've never asked me to actually do any surgery yet. I continue to think it would be fun to try, but whatever. But you know what? I can rake leaves, and that's medical missionary work too. If a nice little lady down the street that's a little uneven on her feet or something like that, she's got a yard full of leaves. Or daffodils aren't coming up properly or something. I don't know, whatever. I can rake leaves. Let's go on. Kind of shift in subject here. Got to polish off a loose thread that I left hanging last night. Judas. Judas was one of the 12 disciples. Jesus washed Judas's feet. Jesus never directly rebuked Judas. The closest he came to rebuking Judas was when he said, "Leave Mary alone," with the perfume. He didn't even say, "Judas, shut up." He didn't say that. He just said, "Leave her alone." That was the closest he ever came to really rebuking Judas. Everything you decide to do in life has its pros and cons. Judas exerted a terrible influence on the other disciples. He was the one that was constantly stirring up the who's the greatest in the kingdom of heaven argument. He had a lot of issues, shall we say. He's the one that made them question what Jesus had said on different issues. He had a very, very sly way of bringing up questions without making it sound like he was questioning anything. He was working the same way Lucifer had worked in heaven, actually. Christ's life of sinlessness, lived on this earth in human nature, is a complete refutation of Satan's charge against the character of God. I think I might have left something in my notes that led me to think I was going to come up with something that's not actually going to be here. Let me see something once here real fast. Yeah, okay. Okay, so I don't have the statement on Judas, but let me explain the thing on Judas then, just since I brought it up. Last night we saw a statement that said that God allowed the rebellion of Lucifer to develop before anything was done to help the other angels. Remember that? And I told you how that just bothered me. I mean, it just seemed so wrong. God, who has foreknowledge, did nothing to help the other angels until this rebellion had already developed. And I thought, that just seems wrong. God, you blew it that time, man. You should have been on the ball. You could have helped all those angels. I mean, you wouldn't have lost a third of your angels if you'd just done something, a little bit sooner. And those thoughts, I didn't actually believe that, but it raised all those questions in my mind. and I didn't really understand it until I was reading Desire of Ages talking about Judas. Do you know why Jesus didn't rebuke Judas? I mean, he rebuked the other disciples. Why did he not rebuke Judas? And the answer in Desire of Ages is because if he had, Judas would have played that game, the victim game type of thing, and it says that Judas would have found sympathy even among the disciples. Jesus knew what was best for the disciples. Yes, Judas was spreading a terrible influence. But if he'd tried to stop it, it wouldn't have worked, and it would have been worse. And so he didn't. There's a statement in Volume 5 of the Bible Commentary as well. It says that Jesus didn't call Judas. Judas came promoting himself and got the disciples all on board. Oh, this guy looks like a fine young man. He's smart and he's well connected. He'd be a great asset, Jesus. It says that Jesus accepted Judas as a disciple because he knew that if he rejected Judas, Judas would go away and use every power of influence that he had against Jesus and his work. And it was actually strategically better to have Judas nearby where he could keep a thumb on him. That's my wording. Ellen White didn't actually say keep a thumb on him, but I find it easy to admire that level of intelligence. God is not having anybody pull the fast one on him. But sometimes it takes a long time to play out. Okay, so why had not God done anything to help the other angels? Because nothing else would have helped them. And actually, he did do everything that could be helped because the only thing that they needed. So here's the thing. Say I've got angel here and angel here. One of them ends up going with Lucifer. One of them ends up staying loyal to God. What's the difference? There's only one thing that made the difference. This one had faith in God. And so God had done everything possible in that he had done everything good in the past to inspire faith. How do you increase? If you've done everything perfectly, how do you try to impress them a little bit more? Okay, I can't tell that story. That would be a good story, but I can't tell it. Let's go on. Okay, so Christ's life of sinlessness lived on this earth in human nature is a complete refutation of Satan's charge against the character of God. Satan had charges against the character of God. We listed them. Christ's life was a refutation. So let's go through the list. How's it looking these days? God said the only way to deal with these accusations was through a process of demonstration. Okay, fair enough. So how was that working out? How did things look to the eyes of the universe at, say, the time of Christ's ascension? Okay, so he came to earth, he was born, he lived, he ministered, he was crucified, resurrected, he's ascended back to heaven, and from that point in time, we're looking at Lucifer's accusations. How are they holding up? Well, let's see. Angels are holy by nature and wise enough to govern themselves, so they don't need God's law. How's that working out? Lucifer, you're going to still make that claim. You just crucified the innocent Son of God. How holy is your angelic nature holding up here so well? That's not looking good. God was unfair when he exalted Jesus above Lucifer. The angels in heaven had just seen Lucifer's principles of operation. Do you think anybody in heaven was saying, I don't think that was a fair election, we should bring back Lucifer now? Was anybody saying that? Yeah, after what they'd seen? No. I don't think there was any doubt that God was not only fair, he was also very wise in maintaining Jesus' status despite Lucifer's desire for the job. So numbers 1 and 2 are kind of down in flames. What about number 3? The plan to create human beings was a mistake. There had been a lot of trouble that came up because of these human beings down there. Things were not pretty. numerically speaking, Lucifer, you could say he had a point, or several million points by that time, or billions. I don't know how many people had lived and died in the 4,000 years. But Lucifer had based his claim on the idea that human beings could not keep the law of God. And so it was a big mistake to make them. But Jesus had just done it. There's nothing quite so sweet as doing what somebody says you can't do. I won't go through the whole thing, but I often will use an illustration about bench pressing a certain amount of weight. You can't do that. You don't have the muscles. Well, what is more sweet than just going ahead and doing it anyhow? It's kind of for me, people with my bad attitude, I'm not sure that Jesus would do this, but it's a na moment, You said it couldn't be done, I just did it. Number 4, God is selfish, unforgiving, and revengeful. Oh, really? Lucifer? Seriously? After the cross? You're going to try and maintain that? 3 and 4 are down in flames. God's law is defective and needs to be changed. I don't know. It worked okay for Jesus. He kept the law. Seemed to work out just fine for him. Now, yes, he did get crucified, but he got resurrected. And now his name is exalted above every other name. That seems to be working out okay. He kept the law. Number 6, nobody could keep it. Oh yeah, he just did. And in human nature, no less. At that point in time, 5 and 6 are down in flames. Now, you can argue with me here if you want. That's fine. The statement said that Lucifer's accusations against the character of God, that Christ's demonstration was a full refutation, or a complete refutation, I think it said. I forget the exact wording. Complete refutation of Lucifer's claims against the character of God. And so, in order to treat that statement quite literally, I have to make a fine distinction and say that the first 6 accusations here are against the character of God. But 7 and 8 are against the proposed plan of God. Maybe that's I'm not totally comfortable with that, but it's about the best I can. Because here's the thing, I can guarantee from Spirit Prophecy that accusations 7, 8, and 9 are still on the table. They have not been refuted. That's why we're here. If you want to know why we are still here, that's it, right there. And if you want to make it real simple, just realize that God's been proven right on 1 through 6. And when he's proven right on 7 and 8, number 9 just disappears. We've got 2 things to work on. Maybe we ought to work on them. It's crazy. All of my life, the church has been consumed arguing about the first 6. That's like replaying D-Day. Oh, well, let's get a bunch of Germans and put them up on the hill here with machine guns, and let's all come wading ashore and see if we can lose this time. We're arguing the wrong argument. The devil loves it. But Jesus showed everything he needed to show. So why isn't it over? Well, because of 7 and 8. But what's going on? Come back later. We'll look at that in our next meeting. How do we close out here? Closing song. We have a closing song, and I didn't mess with it. It's a straight, normal closing song, 319. Lord, I want to be a Christian, and I will let the singers lead out in the song.
Our closing song is hymn number 319, Lord, I Want to Be a Christian.